We're at the top of the hour, so we're going to let some people roll in here, but we'll go ahead and kick things off.
Okay.
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, good night to everyone who's joining us. First of all, we really appreciate you taking the time to be here with us. We're really excited about this one today, and I'm excited for who I have with me. Kind of start things off just to get to know my guests a little bit more if you're not familiar with them. So Greg and Jake, thank you both for being here. Let's go ahead and start with Greg. If you want to kind of just tell the listeners a little bit about yourself so they can get an understanding of who you are.
I'm the lead solution engineer here at Transcend and the subject matter expert for consent. I've been at Transcend for about a year. I am based in the Bay Area, and I have experience in the privacy sector, mostly from Transcend for about a year. I've been doing all sorts of industry as a solution architect, solution engineer before that. I'm happy to be here.
Awesome. Jake, give the listeners a little bit about yourself.
Morning. Yeah. Well, it's morning for me. I'm outside of Seattle. But I am super excited to be here. I've been a long time kind of implementer of the Transcend product, but super excited to have the opportunity to have started my own consulting firm around privacy engineering. It's called Integrative Privacy. Our main goal is taking a holistic approach to privacy engineering, developing better software solutions, and implementing and embedding privacy into organizations. I've been an in-house privacy engineer for a couple of years. I have had pleasure of working with Transcend as well as kind of other privacy technology, and I'm just super excited to get in, have this conversation, and let's share some knowledge.
Oh yeah, it's gonna be more than a conversation. We're gonna dig deep, get an understanding of the whole process and just inside your brain and what you went through and some of the things that you kind of helped with these customers, which is pretty amazing. Now, before we dive into everything and what we're going to get over today, I want to kick things off for both of you. I'll start with Greg. Greg, what's one thing that you've been binging or streaming right now that you've been pretty obsessed with, to give the listeners a little bit about yourself?
Yes. Okay. Well, I'll tell you. I've been rewatching some oldish 5 to 10 years comic book shows, and one of them is called Legion. It's a very kind of creative, a little unhinged, based on the Marvel property, but it's very special. It's a lot of fun.
Nice. Jake, what about you, man? Anything you've been binging or something new or old?
I mean, I've been working through Better Call Saul. That's been my thing. So if you see me start like shuffling some money in the background or like you never know what's gonna come up. But yeah, no, I've been doing that. I am 2 episodes from the finale, so super close. Was a fan of Breaking Bad, and I didn't really catch the Better Call Saul kind of bug until just recently. So that's been my show to watch.
That's a good one. It's slow, but it's kind of, that's just what it is. Like, you got to be in the mood for it.
Yeah.
Bob Odenkirk he's awesome.
Mm-hmm. I didn't think it was like a full, just like it took all the characters from Breaking Bad and did like a full prequel. I thought it was just focused on Saul, so it was definitely a pleasant surprise. But yeah, it's awesome show. Highly recommend.
Definitely. Well, appreciate you guys doing that. Let's go ahead and jump in. Give a little bit of highlight of what we're going to go over today. So we're going to talk about some of the challenges and limitations behind some of the customers that you worked with, Jake, using a first gen content consent manager, things like that. We're going to talk about benefits of migrating off those first gens to next gen privacy solutions like a Transcend. We're going to kind of go through your step-by-step migration process, talk about some essential strategies, completing a legacy migration, and then we're going to get to take a look inside of Transcend's Consent Manager with Greg here and kind of go through that, and we'll leave it open for Q&A. So really excited about this. So anything that you guys want to add before we jump into the first slide?
It looks like we got a nice contingent of over 100 people here, which is awesome. I'm not seeing a lot of movement in any live chat, so please comment. We're all monitoring it. Let's make this a conversation. Just as much as it's between the three of us, I want to make sure we got room for everybody to comment and stuff. So please let's start the conversation. But let's jump into it.
All right, so first of all, why don't we give everybody a little bit of a backstory, Jake? Let's talk a little bit about how we got to this point, and what you're currently doing, and some of the, we'll get into the challenges and limitations, but I think just to paint everybody a little bit of a picture that's listening, give us a little backstory on this.
Yeah, so generally when we're looking at challenges and limitations, we have an image up on kind of the right side here. This is what is a depiction of kind of this first generation of cookie consent platforms. So with GDPR, with a lot of kind of the proliferation of cookie consent and that being a requirement, we saw these first generation technologies that came out that are kind of meeting the standard. They're meeting the compliance requirements. So they're very kind of technology stack agnostic. They don't reach into kind of the organization. What I like to think of it as, you're kind of, it's like trying to drive an RC car. I think a lot of us here have probably driven before, but driving an RC car, you kind of have to, you're from this like third party perspective. You're from like this outside view, and that's kind of what these cookie consent platforms and a lot of the current ones focus on, is just this outside looking in kind of perspective. So with that, like I said, lack of integration, it's stuff isn't really connected into your technology stack. It's a lot harder, or the UI and just interface and usability, those are going to be challenges with a lot of different platforms. But the big key is that as we're continuing to see more changes with regulations, you want to be able to manage a lot of the configurations like kind of on the fly, which is unfortunate, but like that's kind of the state that we're in. You want to be able to not need engineering support every time we need to roll out an update, or you want to be able to do a lot more self-service and be given that information and transparency up front,
right,
to be able to kind of better understand what's going on your platform. Now, with these first generation solutions, you're kind of just seeing the cookie scanner being kind of on the outside looking in, and that's kind of the challenge with not having that level of integration. Sorry for talking over you, Cam.
Yeah, how dare you? Now, I'm just kidding. I thought you were done there. I was going to chime in. So to that point, let's dig in a little bit. So how let's dig into some of the challenges too. And Greg, if you have some input, would love to hear from you as well. But how do these challenges impact like a company's ability to maintain compliance and adapt to regulatory changes and things like that?
Yeah, since it's like this external process, it's a lot harder to manage like a change management kind of solution, right? Like as you're changing and adding new technology, these solutions are much more retroactive in the fact that you have to put it on your website to be able to like actually see it scanned and stuff like that, right? So you can't just have this proactive approach. It's much more separate. It's much more external, which means it's going to be a lot less proactive.
Yeah, we'll see a little bit in more detail later, but it's also down to the granularity of what we can do with the consent and the regulation of everything that happens on the website. Is we'll be able to go much more in detail and select really what type of network request and cookies, etc. It's much more. It's less piecemeal than a different approach potentially.
Yeah, that's a great point, Greg. Yeah, the this is just a cookie scanner, right? Like when couple years ago, that was the only thing we were really worried about was just
Right.
cookies. Now we have like tags, pixels, all these other cookieless tracking, which was like the business's way of like, oh, if we don't drop a cookie, then you don't have to regulate us. Well, it's not really in the essence or in the thought of what the regulation's behind. And so we're seeing people kind of catch on to that. And CCPA is a great example of like, it doesn't matter if it's a cookie or a tracking script, it needs to be regulated. So the first generation really only will regulate your cookies. They then need you to like implement stuff into other platforms to listen on this consent on your kind of consent platform. So your Google Tag Manager needs to be integrated with OneTrust or whatever other solution. And if you don't have that, then you're still not compliant. It just is a lot more work to kind of get that. And I've worked on this for a couple different clients. I've not met a client that has had Google Tag Manager completely set up correctly. It's hard to do. It's complicated. It's confusing. It's a lot easier having everything in one house under one roof.
Yeah, that's a good point. I mean, on top of that, just to add, it's just like anything else in privacy and in tech, things continually change, and you have to be able to keep up with that change. And sometimes, you want to look for that next generation type of tool that can kind of handle more for you instead of having to be left behind. And especially with all these laws coming out, it's best to be ahead of the game for sure. Anything else that you guys want to add on this slide before we move on to the next gen?
Yeah, I wanted to touch on, like, I guess specifically with one of my clients that I worked with, they had a lot of white labeled kind of products, right? So this is when you have kind of your big brand, let's say, I mean, Amazon kind of white labels in the other direction, but Amazon will buy like drop shipped or like cheaper products and then label them as like Amazon Basic, right? A lot of companies do a similar process where they white label other organizations' existing content. By doing that, and especially if you're doing that through like a web application perspective, so think like Stripe has a bunch of different products or stuff like that. When you're white labeling products, you cannot, from like an organization's perspective, especially if you're considering yourself as like a co-controller in that relationship, in that legal relationship, you can't monitor all of those white labeled products in an easy way. You're going to have websites with different domains scattered throughout, and it could be like thousands of different white labeled services or white labeled products throughout the internet. These kind of cookie consent platforms, you just can't possibly scan every single one of them to be able to keep track of it. And if you have professional services for each of your 1,000 white labeled products, you're going to have a big mess on your hands. So that's where kind of this external view can be pretty challenging. But that's other piece, and that's also from like kind of personal experience working through these.
Yeah, that's great. Greg, do you have anything to add there or no?
I don't get into too much of the specifics of how we function just yet.
Hold back, man.
Yeah.
We'll get there, guys. Okay, well, let's go ahead and move on to the next slide, and we'll dive into that one. So benefits of migrating to something like Transcend for consent management. What are some of the strategic benefits that Transcend can offer compared to, a legacy or a first gen type of solution?
So yeah, strategic benefits. I mean, I think it touches here, just the first bullet point being like source of truth of visibility, right? Like we mentioned before, we introed that first generation, you have Google Tag Manager that's going to be managing all the consent for your tags or scripts. It's just all going to be able to be managed in there. It's all the same management as you would kind of categorize your cookies. It's going to be super easy to do. There's no worries about tags or triggers anymore. that's where, like, if we're looking at kind of consistency, it's super helpful. And again, graphic on the top right, the Transcend kind of air gap script sits, and this is like a bi-directional communication. And that's what I think, like, the technology and what I consider the second generation of consent management tools. And Transcend's not the only service that does this, but from a visibility standpoint, from metrics, I think just Transcend's technology is far superior. So users sitting from the outside looking in, but air gap is also kind of on the inside with your solution, and is able to kind of monitor from the inside out. This solves all your issues with white labeled products. As long as air gap's there, it's going to be kind of tracking it. So much easier to kind of look at.
I'm glad that you mentioned that. And if either Greg or Jake, if you guys can kind of elaborate a little bit more on the air gap, just in case nobody's really familiar with it, that'd be kind of nice to hear.
Yeah, absolutely. So the regulation, how we enact it is through a script that is going to load on the client side, so on your users' browsers, and the regulation really is very much akin to a firewall, in the sense that it's a piece of script that's going to patch all the network requests and all the protocols that could be exchanging data with the vendors, the trackers. It's going to call all sorts of browser APIs to check on cookies. And we're really just going to monitor and intercept everything that's happening on this website, so that it is bubbled up to our customer and showing up in your dashboard, so that you know exactly all those network requests and those cookies, and you can tag them appropriately, so that, again, downstream back to the browser, we're able to, at the network level, just prevent anything from happening that shouldn't happen based on the consent. So it's very tight in the sense of, we'll just prevent network calls from happening altogether if they're not okay to do.
Yeah, that's huge. I mean, that goes to my next question: is this has got to be really big for saving resources for a lot of companies, coming from using such a manual, like, first gen type of solution. What does that look like? I mean, you've worked with a couple customers, Jake, going over to Transcend. How much of a burden does that take off of those customers that you've seen?
I think the burden is just like a peace of mind, right? Like there's not going to be a situation where something pops up and you're not aware of it, right? As Greg mentioned, it's like this client side firewall. You're able to see everything kind of going on, and it's all aggregated. You got great metrics as to, like, this is a new data flow, and we'll look into more of the actual UI and kind of the demo portion later, but you just get so much better visibility. It's a peace of mind kind of process. You don't have to monitor it as much. You've got your source of truth there. You don't have to worry about changes to Google Tag Manager or changes to another kind of tag site or changes to the code that you're not aware of. You're going to see everything happening in one spot. And then the real source and savings really comes from when you can leverage like other Transcend products, like the full stack consent, the DSR, data subject request, and the privacy policy, where Transcend's like technology with, you can just include all of your data flows and cookies from like a very transparent standpoint, just right to your privacy notice with Transcend's API. That's huge when developing kind of customer trust. So the entire ecosystem that Transcend has developed is really great, because you guys kind of developed it all in-house and all with a lot of like thought process, not like kind of other solutions or other organizations that find a cool technology, will purchase it and then try to like piecemeal it into their architecture. This is like all built in-house.
Like shots fired there. Shots fired there at some other companies. But that's true. A lot of companies, Yeah, a lot of bigger companies will do that though. They will buy. You'll see Microsoft, and it's not. There's nothing wrong with it, but that happens, and it's not. I think sometimes they'll run into challenges that typically, if, like you said, an in-house product that's created by your team, you're able to manage it and evolve it the way you want it to go. So that's a huge point to make.
Layer of safety and peace of mind. The other thing is all the solutions, be them internal to our customers or just native solutions, like anything that happens in GTM, Google Consent Mode, and there's multiple native solutions that we actually integrate with. You can always mix and match and have some at least have your own integration to consent mode and technologies like this, and then also be able to rely on, okay, well, if anything goes through, Transcend sees it, and we can have a role to catch it at a network level. So potentially it can be pretty easy to mix and match if you have some specific logic that you want to interface with, and then we'll just be there at the very last minute on the browser to just stop anything that's not supposed to go through.
For this slide, or do we want to see the full picture to kind of dive into
let's
that?
look at the full picture. I think this hopefully will like drive the diagram home. And I mean, this is great. I sent Cameron and the Transcend team like my little mocked up like on a napkin. What I see is like one of the best depictions for this difference. And they were able to put this together, which is awesome. But yeah, first generation.
Shout out to Yiming for sure.
Yep.
On our side.
No, 100%. But first generation consent platforms, you can see the cookie scanners kind of on the outside. They're going to follow the same data flow from external websites, and this is from documentation on like these consent platforms. They click through as if they're a user, and that's a way to do it. That's definitely the way that most, I would say, the majority of people in just the majority of websites are kind of focused on this, whether it's like OneTrust or user-centrics or cookie yes. It's a bunch of different platforms that have this kind of external scanning mode. When we're looking at diving deeper, like how does your organization set itself apart? How do they like improve their privacy posture and understanding what technology is on their website? The next generation, where you have Transcend with this bi-directional communication, where they're having this kind of firewall. The air gap script is really like acting in those environments to like regulate the traffic. That's where we see the difference, and it's a much more symbiotic relationship. You're just kind of embedded into the software.
But guys, I don't want to change what I'm doing. I don't want to have to go through. I don't have the time and resources to change products and go through implementation and all those kind of things. Like, how easy of a process is that for someone coming to Transcend?
Do you have the next slide? Is that
yeah,
what
we can
go over?
We'll dive into it from there.
Let's dive into the next slide, because it is a super easy process. I have this great migration process. I've done this work before, so I teased before, but I will make sure that I know we have looks like 132 people right now watching, which is wild.
Thank you guys for being here.
We'll make sure to give the full checklist out to kind of everybody who's interested. And I also know Transcend's going to be at the IAPP GPS conference. I don't have the booth number memorized, but definitely jump out and see them, because they'll also have very similar collateral that I've helped kind of develop alongside with them. Overall migration process for this, I've done the migration in as short as 2 weeks. That's tried and tested. 2 weeks from let's remove your old cookie consent platform to getting onto OneTrust not getting onto OneTrust, getting onto Transcend, and getting everything regulated through the Transcend product. In terms of kind of the overall process, I generally start with scoping. So let's evaluate your current platform. How much do you trust the categorizations that you have in your current kind of consent platform, right? Like if it's OneTrust, what was the last time that you actually reviewed these? Have the scopes changed for any of your like first party cookies? Like let's take a second and really gauge, like, do we want to start fresh or do we want to go with this existing kind of categorization? Also kind of look at where all the changes need to happen. I think people forget that you need to make sure that you have notices inside of you have hyperlinks inside of your privacy notices. You have to have your footer message needs to get updated. If you have like DSR processes that also include kind of cookie banners, let's make sure that we update kind of everything there. And once we kind of have that, it's this big push to do the data categorization. Now, some organizations with that 2-week timeline, they say we're comfortable with our existing categorizations, and then all I do is I just lift and shift all that information into Transcend, and we can go live, like I said, in 2 weeks. Otherwise, it's let's look at all this new information that we get from the Transcend platform, and let's go through and make like valuable decisions, and start precedents of like, this is how we categorize a cookie, or this is how we categorize this data flow. You're going to get a flood of information, and we'll show that more in a little bit. And then deploying and testing can be as easy as like, we don't even need to test in your development environment. We can test directly in production. We can test with just these script tags, because air gapped is this like client-side firewall. We can use the browser console to test it directly, like right there for each user. For like, I'm just on the website doing testing. We also have obviously like development testing and stuff like that through a normal CI/CD pipeline. But quick and dirty, we can get it done really easy. And then my last piece is I just make sure the documentation's buttoned up. My goal is to make sure that every organization's enabled to continue to leverage the Transcend tool and continue to kind of keep it updated. So I have documentation, training sessions, all that stuff already laid out and ready for people to use.
Awesome. Jake, being an engineer and going through this process, it seems like you probably nerded out quite a bit in a good way. What was your favorite part of like migrating from a first gen to something like Transcend?
My favorite kind of part was I was brought into a client for like a very emergent kind of situation. There was a cookie that was like acting bad on their website, and it was like stopping payment processing for them, right? And that's like a huge issue. So I called up, and like I was able to get like the Transcend air gap script like onto the page. There's a bunch of different ways to do it. Either you could do it through Google Tag Manager really quickly, or there's a cool function inside of like the Taper Monkey Chrome extension that allows you to like inject a script into the browser. I was able to get the Transcend air gap script like up through that onto the page, and within 20 minutes I saw 500 data flows and cookies and everything just within the browser, and was able to like actually understand like, okay, this is what this cookie kind of means. This is where the like one of the big things is just where the cookie and data flow lives on our page. And we'll show that in the demo, but it's like you don't have to guess where the cookie is anymore. It's like, you know where it's showing up on your website. From a debugging standpoint, that just makes it so much easier, because you can just look at like, okay, what are all the cookies on this checkout page, and which one could be causing this issue. It just was like night and day visibility, like I said, over a couple hours, that we were able to solve the issue, get that cookie better regulated, and then, like I said, within a couple weeks was on to Transcend, and that started that like migration process for the client.
Nice. Thanks for going into that. Let's go ahead and slide to the next slide. So some essential strategies for completing a migration from legacy providers. How does a company communicate the need for change or secure buy-in from, like knowing that they need to do this kind of migration?
Yeah, it's I mean, one of the big things that I've been seeing is that there's been a lot of kind of wiretap lawsuits thrown around kind of in the ad space right now. There was Meta got hit with a wiretapping law, and then I think all the lawyers kind of came out and started just hitting various companies with like low level lawsuits just to make a couple $1,000s. But if you're a company, like that can be pretty crazy to kind of worry about. My clients who had that issue, we went into Transcend, flipped a switch, and that metapixel was now off. It was just that easy. You don't have to worry about code changes. You don't have to worry about engineers kind of needing to do those changes. So when you're kind of trying to communicate the buy-in with stakeholders, I mean, I've had great conversations with some people who I've met actually through Transcend's Privacy Pulse community, which I would highly recommend.
Shout out.
But we shout out to that. Shout out to Morgan as well, who does a great job running that. You have to take it from like a risk-based approach. You have to look at the monetary kind of understanding of this is the potential risk that we have. This is kind of how we can better mitigate those risks.
Right.
And when we're looking at from a legal perspective, it's ease of use. And a lot of these privacy teams don't have a lot of the resources. So ease of use is like a huge benefit for changing regulations. Again, we'll go over the demo, but updating regional configurations is 2 clicks and you can press it live and it will just happen. There's no guesswork. There's no like long checks or confusing UIs. It just kind of works. And so that's been just kind of letting people kind of see it and showing that, hey, we don't need to just regulate cookies. We need to regulate everything. That's been a huge point for like getting this kind of buy-in.
Yeah, and that's super important because privacy teams are usually not a lot of people. I mean, sometimes one person running it. Sometimes it's, the security team, the CTO or the CISO even might fall under them depending on the company and their structure. So having something like this tool making things easier is always going to be helpful.
Or it's the legal department whose job is to try to regulate software. I mean, it's just not a recipe for success. There's a lot of lawyers that I know who are great at their job and they know technology and are able to kind of understand and call BS, but it takes somewhat of like an engineer's mind, or you need to have like the evidence in people's face to be able to like sometimes get that buy-in or get the change.
Right.
Transcend solution not only allows you to like regulate the cookies, but you can also like continually audit, continually monitor, and it kind of gets you started into this realm of like privacy operations center, which is pretty cool.
How important during this process is something like data mapping? I mean, obviously it's important to, you don't really know what you don't know.
Mm-hmm.
Going through this process, is that a pretty big step?
Yeah, monitoring and doing like kind of the categorization of these data flows and understanding where they're going is super important. Trying to clean that up. There's probably like a couple dozen data flows that my clients are just like, oh, we don't have a contract with these people anymore. So let's get the cookie kind of off, or let's get the data flow off, right? You're able to kind of do that due diligence, and Transcend's like automated categorization just kind of tells you for the most part where this cookie's coming from, whether it's like HubSpot or Marketo or any of these other solutions. And if you don't have a relationship with them, then it's pretty easy to tell them, hey, it's being dropped on this page. Let's go remove it from that. Huge part of this.
Yeah. How going through some of the customers that you worked with in this transition, how did they kind of address, like, how do you help them address like potential resistance or, to change, or ways to ensure user adoption when doing something like this?
Yeah, I think that is a great segue kind of into why I kind of started my organization. So I take my LLC, or I'm a sole proprietor or whatnot, but I call myself kind of integrative privacy. And for me, this is a shift in the kind of mindset of like organizations are for the most part aren't ready or are not practically adopting privacy by design yet. And there's a lot of key organizations or like your big FANG companies and stuff like that that are innovating on privacy, but a lot of these mid-size or startup organizations just don't have privacy by design nailed down yet, and that needs to kind of to the precursor of privacy by design is what I consider like integrative privacy. It's
Right.
taking a holistic approach to privacy, understanding that it's not just a software tool that needs to be put in as a compliance checkbox. It's understanding the employees, understanding the data subjects and how they're going to interact with the software, and enabling your employees to like understand kind of how privacy works in their job. And so a big part of that is education, and big part of that is like understanding and driving home this idea of being like a data steward. Like every company doesn't own the data. You're just borrowing data from the people who are using your product, right? It's no, and that's like a huge piece. And I think that's a gap that a lot of people might not kind of bring to mind. But data, we don't own the data, and data has risk. It's not just an asset, but it also has liability too. And so you have to drive home that understanding of like, this is why we need to do these things, and this is how we drive and develop better trust with our customers. Because when you have customers that trust you, you're going to have better repeat business. You're going to have better you're going to bounce back from adversity a lot easier. You're going to have more customer loyalty. It just makes sense. And I think a lot of organizations are adopting and pushing towards that. We need to be a lot more transparent in the privacy space.
It definitely is, because you can see the shift with organizations who care about, or I'm sorry, consumers that care about what an organization is using for their privacy programs, and what, people are paying attention to that, and they're educating themselves a lot more, and you can see the shift. And it's awesome to see. The community is so strong. There's a lot of good stuff that's going to happen this year alone. We've already seen it with some new laws, and obviously AI is a big topic right now. But it's nice to see when you have, tools like this in the next generation that can help push that forward, when it comes to building a privacy program. So love that. Before we get to this next slide, anything else you guys want to add?
No, this is great.
Okay. So an inside look. Transcend's consent management solution. Anything that we want to touch on? What are some of the key features and capabilities that might not be on this screen, Greg or Jake, that you want to maybe highlight? We can kind of go over that before diving into the demo.
I'm just in demo mode already. Now we've touched on a lot of them. So, and there's a lot on screen right now also.
Yeah, I mean, this is a crew, and like I said, we're still monitoring kind of chat. If anybody wants to jump in with a idea or something they want us to double click
please.
Okay.
If you have a question, shoot it our way.
I'll go slow and give ample time for interjections. So sharing the dashboard. Here we go. I'm going to share a window here.
The anticipation.
I know.
Cameron, I don't think you ever shared what your show was. What you're watching
Me?
recently? Yeah.
Oh man, I'm going through Peaky Blinders again. One of my favorite shows. House of Dragon. You know, just cool stuff, I guess.
Okay.
Nice.
Taking
I love
notes.
it.
Yeah, I hear good things.
All right, Greg.
Okay. So I want to show you briefly a quick overview of how simple your implementation can be. I'm going to start with the dry stuff real quick. This is the first steps that you would start with deploying Transcend Consent and our script air gap, mostly simply by putting a very lightweight snippet in your website that's going to load our airgap.js onto your website, both in production and in testing environments. All you need to do is make sure the script is added to all of your pages, that it loads as early as possible, and we're going to start having a view of everything that happens on your website and allow you to regulate it. There are a few nitty gritty. Obviously, I'm going into the high level, but we can, depending on use case, this can get pretty specific and complicated. But we only need to look at the high level for now. The only thing I'll mention that you might be interested in is how to behave when a cookie or data flow or network request data flow that we call it is unknown and hasn't been triaged yet. You have multiple policies over here, which is either it hasn't been triaged yet, so we'll let it through, all the way down to this one hasn't been identified yet, so we'll block it. Obviously, that'll put a little bit more onus on you to do triaging diligently. Otherwise, the new technologies will be blocked. But that's fully configurable over here as a behavior.
Yeah, I mean, not even the onus on you to do the triaging. This is the onus on like the marketing teams or like the other teams within the company of like letting you know that new stuff's being dropped, right? I love this kind of process because it's like if your change management process, if you're trying to lead with the carrot and nothing, you got to talk to me to have this not be blocked kind of thing, and that's it's very effective and it works out. So this was a huge piece that I really enjoyed.
Yeah.
And then I did want to mention on the installation side, so the small air gap script, very lightweight personally, and this will be kind of anecdotal, but I've run lighthouse tests, performance tests on websites, have not had any like material changes. They've all came back. Lighthouse tests that were 99 stayed at 99 after installing and starting kind of the air gap script. So super lightweight, super effective.
Yeah. And by the way, we mentioned doing triage diligently, etc., and so on. Do have to remember there is a test environment, so obviously everything that's being dropped. This is so straightforward that you could just about do production testing, but there is a test environment, so should be good there. So I think the next interesting step over here is how you define your regional experiences. So as a heads up, this is a test website that we use for our own testing that is public but doesn't get a lot of traffic. And over here you see all the nice colors. We've definitely played with the configuration of the regional experiences quite a bit. It is a bit more straightforward out of the box with kind of default options that we offer, different kind of standard interpretations. This is the time for me to say my classic not a lawyer can't necessarily advise you to exactly how to interpret the regimes and the regulations, but we do have all those experiences as a default in the box. Mostly GDPR, for example, you'll see here that standard as a standard has multiple different all of the data purposes showing up over here that are being defined. So what you do is you create your regional experiences and you assign what type of data processing purposes are applicable to that region. And then you can define which one are opted out by default. For GDPR, it's pretty standard to have the experiences opted out by default. And then you can define a banner that might show automatically within that experience. And I don't know, Jake, if you have something to say about the regional experiences, but I'll show the banners very quickly also.
The only other thing I wanted to add was you have like a couple different cool functionality here on this page. If you slide over to the left just a little bit, right there is perfect. You have languages, which is like pretty cool. So Transcend's able to look at like the browser language and also can present kind of the regional experience based on browser language or based on like time zone. What's interesting with the language side is when we look at like an EU citizen like going over to the US, like what banner are they supposed to get? A lot of people consider that there's debate within the legal realm or lawyers kind of talking about that. Like, do you present them, since they're in the US, do you present them a US banner, or if they're from the EU, should they get a EU kind of banner, GDPR kind of banner? So I'm again not a lawyer. I'm not a lawyer. Greg's not a lawyer. We don't have any lawyers on the call, but it's up to you guys and it's up to your organization to make that call. But this gives you the functionality of like, if they have Portuguese, like let's give them a certain banner experience. And that's a really
And we're not lawyers, of course, but any statements we say, we can always just end with allegedly.
Allegedly. Yeah.
Allegedly. We'll be right back.
Yeah.
All right, we're gonna stay right here.
Those are fairly standard ways of implementing. Yeah, if you want to cast a slightly wider net to try and offer the protection to folks that are not necessarily identified by just their locality, we can add that to your regimes. Okay, so yeah, for those banners that are shown automatically, there are multiple different types that we offer by default over here, and I'll show very quickly. There's a link in our dashboard to our public repository where the interfaces, all the UI for consent banners are deployed and here for you to see. Technically, for a team that really wants to own that process, you can actually just fork that repository and maintain your own. But obviously, unless you have very strong needs for an extremely customized and self-owned solution, you can just select a type of banner and we'll just handle it and show it for you. So that goes from multiple types of different patterns for the buttons, accept all, reject all, more choices, some combinations, and specific toggles, inverted or not, and then it goes to toggles all the way down to simple privacy notices if you want to just show a notice of what exactly you do with the data, including this one is a pretty standard widely used banner for a CPRA type cell of info opt-out, for example.
Yeah, so all the UI, so these are all UI like styling. This is all out of the box. All the customization here is within the Transcend UI.
Right.
No need to get engineering requirements to do that. Your design team can come in, just give them access. They can update it themselves. Super easy.
Yeah.
You can even update your own CSS file to have it kind of go there, which is it's just all right here. The language is also on the other tab up here as well. And I know I'm kind of pushing Greg through this, sorry. But he's it's all the language is updated right here. You can export this as a CSV, upload it later, send this off to your legal team, and they can just go through and update it so that it's consistent with like your privacy notice. Super easy. No, it's just that's how it is, kind of thing. I don't know what else to say.
Yeah, you do well to push me through this, because I think we want to have a little bit of time for after the demo. So I'll show you through the meaty part of what we call the triage. So this is what happens once you have air gap running on your website for a few hours. Again, this is a test website, so it doesn't have a ton of traffic, but this is what would look like once you have triaged everything. Everything that's been showing on your website is over here. The triage view is before you approve those data flows. So over here, our instance is fully triaged, but it would look just about exactly the same, except you would get to approve a data flow instead of deleting it. And so these URLs that we notice network requests being made on your website from, they're going to show up with our best guess as to what service they're pertaining to, as well as what purposes they're related to. And you get to review this and assign your final determination for the data processing purpose. And to help you go through that process, we have sorted them by activity. Again, not a ton of traffic on this website. And at the top, we'll show the ones that are the most frequent in your traffic, as well as where those data flows have been encountered, the most frequent locations where these data flows have been encountered. So this one is the process where, depending on what shows up in here and based on your previous implementation, it is likely that you had an idea of a dozen, 2 dozen scripts at a script level, what's running on your website. Now that AirGap is on your website, we see everything just about. So you're going to see a few things and you're like, oh, I didn't know this was there. And the triage process might involve for potentially marketing, knowing what type of technology is on your website, potentially engineering being able to look into a cookie or a URL request and determine that it's actually an internal service or it's a piece of technology that has been used on this website for a particular reason, and then potentially your legal group being able to help determine whether or not that data flow is sale of info or advertising analytics, and kind of do the triage. And that's, other than what we've seen, that's very extremely straightforward, all the regional experiences, the banners, etc. This is where you're going to just do the meat of the regulation, is just really, going through those data flows and those cookies and assign the correct purposes to them so that we can regulate them properly. And the cookies view is extremely similar. It keys off the name of the cookie, which can be either a specific cookie or regular expressions, to catch many of them, and then just works exactly the same, determine what exactly it is based on our clues, contextual clues, and our best guess, if we're familiar with that specific cookie, and then just review and approve.
Yeah, the purposes here is huge as well. With other first generation platforms, no names, but with other first generation platforms, it's like if you're saying do not sell my information, automatically they just opt out of advertising and analytics cookies. It's just no questions asked. You don't get functionality there. But if you're doing first party tracking, or if you're doing first party analytics through like your own endpoint maybe, or you're doing something like dang, now I'm missing the technology, but Amplitude was one that I remember. Amplitude is like first party tracking that just doesn't, it's not going to be sale of info. So if somebody says don't sell my information, then you should be able to continue to track that. So with Transcend, you can tag each data flow or cookie with like multiple purposes, and that will make it much easier for people to kind of leverage and get buy-in there. And then, yeah, Craig, perfect jump into here. This was the last piece I wanted to make sure you showed off, but this is how you update GPC or do not track. It's, you just click in, you select GPC or DNT, and you save the changes. That's it. Nothing else. It just works, and that's the I don't know. It's just the magic of it.
Yeah, this instance is pretty noisy because we created a whole lot of purposes to just do some testing. But typically, you would have the colored ones that are the ones that we ship with. they have their default assignments to the GPC and DNT signal. And then you can create more if you need some more granular or some specific use cases that you want to tag them with. And yeah, I think I don't think I want to spend too much time on this, but I wanted to show briefly our testing and debugging capabilities. So we have since we're doing everything on the client side through a script, you're able to load any website and change the behavior on the spot to do some testing. So this, once you're live, you could also do on your website. You can type a URL over here, and then you can override whether or not regulation is turned on yet. This is kind of our launch toggle, so that we actually start regulating those data flows, and you can pretend you're in a certain regime, and then you can show banners, and that enables just client-side testing extremely efficiently. And there's all sorts of console commands that you can use to see what regime you're detected, what is your state of consent, show banners at will, and just do all of your testing and see why things have been stopped, and kind of just go from there and understand what's let through and what's being stopped and for what reason. And similarly, we have a playground for styling and CSS testing so that you can do all of this very, very easily and quickly.
A little bit longer, so hopefully we can get some questions in the comments. But I mean, if there's none, then that means we probably talked a lot. But
That's good.
I mean, the last piece that I want to just call out is that Transcend has done a great job of keeping all their information and documentation public. I think that's something that I wish more organizations did. For me, when I looked at Transcend versus other options, this was a positive point, right? Because if you're leaving all your documentation public, anybody can get insight to learn more. You guys aren't hiding any skeletons in the closet. This is how we use our software. This is what we do. This is what we don't do. And this is how you can effectively do it. And documentation is a great example of everything that you can do with the software, and it helped me create like organization specific information and stuff like that. But it's big kudos for that.
Great point. Because I don't see very many products or websites that show that kind of stuff, which I think is fascinating. But yeah, if anybody has any questions, if not, we'll wait a few minutes here. But I wanted to thank everyone for attending today, and especially my guests, Greg and Jake. You guys are awesome.
That's been fun.
Thank you so much for taking the time to do this, and thank you everyone that joined. You'll also get an email from me as a follow-up for if you missed some of this or you wanted to watch it again. You'll get a recording of this, which will go straight to our YouTube, and you can catch it again. But if you have questions, feel free to reach out to me as well, or any of us.
Yeah,
happy
we get a lot
to
of questions asynchronously, so I'm sure we'll answer more in the future.
Yeah, and I'll send over to you, Cameron, the checklist, the more detailed checklist that maybe you can, if you can include that out to anybody participating.
Yes.
I mean, we held over 100 people concurrent, which is awesome during this conversation. So I think it definitely was super valuable. Probably should have prefaced this up front, but I am not a paid spokesperson of Transcend. That would probably, maybe we'll add that to the LinkedIn or the YouTube video. But I am not a paid spokesperson. I do have public affiliation with Transcend as part of like their professional services offerings, and partner with them to improve their technology. This is all my personal opinions that I've developed through kind of firsthand experience. So maybe we'll cut that to add to the top of the video, maybe. But yeah, that's this has been a great conversation, and hope we can have another one soon.
Yeah. Well, everyone have a wonderful rest of your week, and we'll see you guys next time. Thank you all.
Awesome.